Welcome to a call between the DigLife Collective and Collective One, which seem like sister organizations in many ways. I'm Christina. I'm a co-founder of the Collective and a knowledge ecologist. I'm interested in how organizations and communities are literally living systems and how information flows through them, like sunlight or nitrogen in a river system. And I will pass it to Joachim.
Hi there, I'm Joachim Stroh here in Brooklyn, New York. Sunny Brooklyn, New York today. Spring is coming. So my background is in computer science and knowledge management, always trying to bridge the gap between what's happening in the technology scene versus inside organizations. So I've done HR consulting for larger organizations for organizational design and social collaboration tools. How do you network? How do you connect people inside organizations? How do you begin better sharing mechanisms and future of work stuff? So here with the DigLife Collective, I'm a co-founder too, and trying to build a few tool sets now to do a very similar thing, right? Bring people together into these shared spaces, shared online spaces, provide them with better capacities to actually collaborate and to make sense out of the work they're doing here, right? And see where we take them. So all great questions to answer. All right, let me hand over to who else is here. John, are you there?
Hello, my name's John Grant. I'm looking forward to an interesting presentation. Michael.
Just LinkedIn. Likewise. Am I supposed to say something about anything more than that?
Say open money.
Open money, yeah. Yeah, money as sovereign identity issue. Network of some reality. Coming soon.
And Philip Sheldrake will be on the way.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Maybe we can go on then, on our side. Okay, so I am Pepo. I am the founder of Collective One. I've been working on Collective One for more than a year now. And Collective One was originally, or is oriented to be a tool that enables open collaboration, similar to the collaboration that emerges from open source projects. And the key difference is that open projects in Collective One have formal value systems and formal governance systems, but they remain open, similar to how open source projects are open for anyone to contribute to them. I've worked on Collective One as a platform this time, developing it and focusing mostly on the value recognition part of it at the beginning. And when I moved, I was mostly as a solo developer. When I moved to the governance part of the project, not just the value accounting part, basically we started with a process in which decisions would have to be, but you usually think of collective governance. Somebody proposes something, everybody else's vote on it. So it was a voting platform. But the experience and our path drive us away from voting, because it's expensive. Usually people don't have the bandwidth to vote on everything, and it becomes more clear that governance was more a communication problem, and open collaboration was not much about being able to have a common value system. So just the value system, having a token, for instance, was not enough to get people to work together. It was It was harder to let contributors share their visions and understand their different visions and combine them into something meaningful. It was really hard to do that. It requires a lot of face-to-face communication. So since then, I've been framing Collective One as a communication platform, especially for the part of governance, and this gradually converted into the underscore protocol, which is basically trying to bring concepts of code development, especially Git development, in which you don't have to agree on a single version of something, but you enable multiple perspectives to coexist and nurture each other, so that every member of the organization is free to move forward, either individually or with a group, and they don't have to ask a lot of permissions. So it's a different paradigm for collective creation. Instead of agreeing on what you are going to do and do it all together at the same time, you enable people to move individually, and then letting easy ways for these different paths to merge into each other and combine into each other into a meaningful whole. So we have been working on this, and I made a prototype last year. Is the current application of Collective One. It's a web application. It has some principles of the underscore protocol, but since this year we have started in a re-implementation of the underscore protocol that will include the version control system and will be generalized in many ways. So we are starting from scratch.
Yes, so for my part, I'm Guillem. I'm a developer, but just recently started working with Pepo. I'm very interested in open collaboration and also scalable collaboration between people. And yeah.
Okay.
And Colin, we're recording. If you would like to introduce yourself, or just finishing up introductions.
Yeah, sorry, I just saw the meeting link. I'm still getting used to all the new meetings. I assume you said introduce myself. I just got audio. Okay, thank you. My name's Colin Kilburn. In Canada, New Brunswick, and quite new to DigLife, and I'm just trying to learn what's going on. I've talked with everybody here but the Pepo boys, and I don't recognize John Grant. So anyway, thank you.
I do have, this Joachim, I do have like one question maybe before you start getting into the more of the details. So you mentioned, Pepo, that you sort of redesigned the whole system from scratch. Could you give us some thinking thoughts on why did it, what were the main triggers for that? You know, was it more coming collected community feedback, or was it a technology, architecture issue, or what made you rethink this this approach, or maybe just key learnings, right, from what you've seen before?
I think it was from the very early use cases, and we haven't had many, to be honest, but there's 2 or 3 communities that started using Collective One, and seeing other platforms, also learning from other experiences. One of the key aspects we wanted to change was to shift the perspective of the tool from a project-based approach to an agent-based approach. So instead of sort of like Slack or Trello, which are completely project-based, or almost any like software, ERM, sorry, we shift to a Google Drive approach in which each user can organize the content in the platform the way they prefer. So there are common ways of organizing, because you can have like a folder of the entire organization, but you can take any element and reorganize it the way you want. So this is the agent perspective. And there are some insights in the current platform, but because it started as a project-based, project-centered interface, it required a lot of changes to move it to an agent-based. So it's also because of the development. There are a lot of legacy in the code that it's better to just build it correctly from the beginning. Also, and the second part is the version control system. So the version control system is so deep that it really requires you to change the entire data structure, and that only that would have required to rethink most of the application. So there's those two things to change from a project-based to an agent-centered approach, and to enable the version control system in such a flexible way as what we want to do, because we end up finding ourselves in this situation, which we wanted a simple tool for projects to make decisions together and agree on some agreements and goals and vision. But we wanted so much flexibility on this co-creation process of the visions and goals of the project, that we ended up having a sort of something like Git, as general as Git, that but is focused on this use case of ideas. And it has some differences with Git, but it's something. I mean, the general nature of the underscore protocol is something we just found ourselves in. We started from a collaboration tool, and then we found ourselves in this generalized way of organizing information. And so now we are excited about the underscore protocol, the rules. Doesn't it hold? I mean, how to which extent it holds, and we are really excited, Guillem and me, about how it looks until now. We are building the first prototypes, and they look like they hold together, and it might be possible to do something that looks like what we want to build.
That's great. Thank you so much, Pepe. That's really good feedback. I see Philip just joined us. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi. Yes. Good to see you again, Pepe. How you doing? Sorry, I couldn't join at the top of the hour, but a work call ran over. So, but I guess I'm fairly up to speed, as much as you could have covered in 15 minutes of underscore protocol and collective one. But yeah, good to see you again.
Well, yeah, go on, Christine.
Just following on what you just said, I would love to know, it seems like it's kind of a big challenge for many people to remember their context. I would love to know any insights you have on getting people to remember their own context. And Michael, I have feedback coming, looking like from your mic.
Does Michael have any feedback? Okay. So I'm not sure if I understand your question correctly. So it's
what do you exactly mean with remembering the context?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about Slack channels as a potential context, or a chat, any chat space, sometimes people will be very diligent about where they're posting what, and remembering their context. And people just dump it all in general channel or whatever that is, because it takes effort. It's almost like getting people to tag things, or it just takes effort to think about and remember context. And I'm wondering if you have any hacks for that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the underscore. I mean, the approach of the underscore protocol is that one of the objectives that it wants to achieve is that these digital spaces, these shared online spaces, we call them virtual contexts, are not associated with one single platform mandatorily. Okay, so one thing I see is problem, and I see it is right now is as these digital spaces are being more and more used, and there are more distributed organizations that are naturally emerging, mostly around the blockchain space. A lot of developers interested around the same things. So a lot of Telegram's group starting, like a lot of them. Then this Telegram's group really fast faced the scale limit of just a couple of people, like 10 people, and they moved to a discourse. And then you have this, I don't know, at least how many discourses around Ethereum development are. I would guess that at more than 20. I know at least of 8 of them, but I imagine there are many of them. And so each of these different Telegram groups that evolve into different discourse forums that then interact well with GitHub. I don't think we want to cover GitHub because GitHub is about code. This is more about conversations. And then the fact that these virtual contexts are being used so much now that in a way that is not the same as other tools, because it's not the same that a standard company that is already existing and a closed group of people with their own internal processes ongoing that embrace digital too, than a distributed collective of people, of like-minded individuals with a common interest that just are starting to use a tool. So these two groups need different tools, actually. Mm-hmm. And so most of these digital tools are oriented to companies that are stable teams. So also as these digital spaces start to become more useful, and at the same time, there are more users that really need that. One of the key aspects of the underscore protocol that I want to put in the middle is that the content that you create on any of these spaces, even if they are in different servers, can be easily migrated from one place to another. So you can take, I don't know if you know matrix.org, in which you can take one conversation in one place and move it to access it from any other place. It is a similar thing. I think of you make a post or you create some content in a discourse forum. This content can be moved, reorganized into other forums or in your personal notes flexibly. And maybe remembering the context is a feature that you get from the underscore protocol, because you will have these links explicitly. I mean, instead of copy pasting some idea that you liked or just bookmarking it with some link, you will be able to have explicitly the same content, say a comment you saw in discourse on your personal notes, but because the link to the origin is not lost, you can see, okay, this comment, this piece of text originally was posted in this other forum by this other person. I want to go there and see what we're talking about at that point. That's all what I can say. No. Mm-hmm. So this idea of letting information move, like easily jump from one place to another without having to actually. These are a special kind of link, because the infrastructure is not linked. The two servers, the block, the Notepad application does not connect to the database of the discourse application. It only holds an ID similar to like a Git in a commit. You say the parent of this content is in another platform and is this ID. Okay, and that's just, this information is not in the architecture level. It's just abstract information that you can then use to say, okay, I want to see that platform and see what they were talking about. So that's it.
I have a question, Peppo, but before I do, I just realized I haven't met your colleague who's with you there. I don't think we met when I was in Barcelona. Hi, I'm Philip.
Hi, I'm Guillem. I recently joined the project, very recently, so I'm just getting started as well, and very excited about things.
Lovely to meet you. I have a question about the nesting of contexts, which immediately renders in my mind a tree-like architecture. In fact, actually, when I click on one of the little underscore icons, I go to a tab where I can see a tree-like nesting. I just wondered, what do you think about contexts overlapping rather than nesting? More, I guess some would call it rhizomatic rather than arboreal. Another way of saying that in plain language is more messy than tree-like.
Yeah, I think
messy's good. Messy. Let's go with messy. Can you have messy context?
Yeah. So the nesting is not perfect. I mean, you can have one context under many places, so it's not just
That helps.
one parent per element, and you can have cycles. So it's not a tree, it's a graph, but it's a directed graph, and it can be cyclic. But I do think that if you look like locally to this graph, you will see emerging trees. So because usually people like to say, this is my document, this is my proposal, and that becomes like a parent. But it doesn't mean that something that is a children cannot be found as a parent of his parent from some perspective. So in the end, you can have cycles and messy things. And the way of trying to couple with that complexity is that the interconnection between these contexts is part of the branch. So it's also part of a perspective. It doesn't want to be unique. It's not like this is the perfect decomposition of the knowledge about this organization, if you are thinking about Collective One and a project. So maybe there is one that is the master branch, we call them perspectives, so this is the master perspective, that also has some governance process on top of it, so we know that all the persons in the organizations agree on that or voted on that, so it has some value. But it doesn't mean that this is the only way of interacting with the content of this organization. You can, as if they were Google folders, reorganizing the way you want, ignore most of it and just listen to your local team. That local team can have sub contexts that are not visible to the rest of the organization, that kind of things.
Thank you. That makes, well, I think it makes sense. Of course, you never know whether it makes sense because all you've got is your own mind to go by. But it sounds like I'm getting a picture of how you're thinking.
Can we see a demo? Is there anything you would like to screen share and show?
Okay, so I can share a couple of things. So let me see. So where should I go here? I can show you the prototype of Collective One, which is not yet underscore protocol compatible, but to give you a sense of the experiments that we have run until now, And then I can show you some images of the working paper, so the white paper that we have been preparing with Guillem, to explain you what are the challenges that we have found. I just have to find how to share the screen here. Wait. So you are seeing.
Yeah, we can see your Chrome browser. Yeah.
Perfect. So I go to Collective One. And this is, as I was telling you, you have this project tab on the left. And this is test project. And basically, the origin of context are called sections in the current version of Collective One. And you can think of this as a way you can create these subsections that can be used as channels or content containers. So typically, you have some channels for maybe development, marketing team. I don't know. Stuff you can create as many as you want, of course. And so these are like Slack channels. And then on each of these you can talk. Okay. This is the first thing, is that these spaces can have conversations. At least in Collective One, they have conversations, and as a separate content, they have static content. So there's two types of content. River-like, I like your analogy. River-like content, which are the conversations they are forgotten. So everything you write in the chat is designed to be forgotten. So just be aware of it. And then you have this sort of like pinned items generalization that actually looks more like a Trello board, but this is just static content. So I don't know, on development, so it will be issue 1, Okay, so you can create these cards, and these cards are not their order is static. Okay. The other thing, where things start to become a bit more interesting is that, well, you can have, for instance, I don't know, milestones. Okay, and you can create subsections, and this is the tree structure I was talking about. And these subsections are, again, communication channels and content containers. But because they are nested, one thing you can do is, well, they can be in two places at the same time. For instance, I don't know, a milestone that is part of two teams. This is a common conversation room for both the development and marketing. So
there's your overlap, Philip.
This would be something like an overlap, yeah. And then, because these nested structures are evident, the conversations can be aggregated. So I'm listening to the marketing conversation, and it automatically shows me all the messages that people write on things related to marketing. So milestone 1, but also the development team will be able, channel will be following that conversation. And if it's becoming noisy because conversations start to step on each other, then you can go to the milestone conversation and see it clear. Okay, and then this is for conversations. And then the second thing is that the cards also can be in multiple places at the same time. So what's happening here? So one card, okay. One card now is here, but it's also in random. I can show you a little bit how we were testing it today when it becomes more complex, but we have the spec and we make like meeting notes, and these meeting notes are in a meeting sections, but they then move directly into the Trello board for the Kanban board of the sprints and everything. So things can be in multiple places at the same time, and you can nest these things the way you want. So I don't know, story 1. And the other thing, I wanted to do this. It's the perfect moment for a bug, but no, nothing seems to work, or at least. So the second thing is that this nested context, this nested context can be used to build more complex documents, more complex information structures. So you could build a whole document as a nesting of sections, and by default, each of the elements of the document will be a conversation channel and a content container. So just to give an example, the white paper we have been working on for the underscore protocol is made of many sections, each of which is made of cards, which are paragraphs, and can be seen like I don't know, this section alone, but also the underscore protocol all together. And there is also this read-friendly view. So you can build complex content structures. And this is the genesis of the underscore protocol. In the underscore protocol, we are generalizing this by changing a couple of things. So basically, I would like to know if maybe you have questions for up to this moment. There are a couple of other details, but I don't think it's better if we can talk a little bit more than me just going forward like a horse or something.
Joachim, I'm just thinking about our discussions about conversation and how conversation works, or should I say how conversation has been frustrated in the digital realm to be as natural as it might be, relation of conversation to social objects and the location of the one and the location of the other. Is that what's going through your mind as you're seeing this?
What I would say to that is that the idea to help organize conversations is to make the conversations close to to make the conversation automatically contextualized. So if you make a comment about, I don't know, this spec, you can say I like it, and it is automatically contextualized. And then people looking at the development chat, they know that I like it, they like it, the spec one or the story one. If it's only one chat, then you have to give a lot of context to have. That's just one basic answer. The other answer is the naturality of the conversations. That's not precisely addressed for the moment by us. We have some ideas like to enable like audio, even video, back and forth, that kind of things. But I don't think that's like the priority now. We're starting just like a text chat thing.
Yeah, so let me jump in a couple of thoughts here. First of all, that's a wonderful approach here, and we're all trying to solve these same kind of problems, navigating these rapidly flowing spaces, right, of information. Too much stuff flowing through this, and you want to begin sort of building, you know, put in some kind of a structure, some level of a structure, and make sense of that information there. So the kudos for that work here, Pippo, and everybody else who's working on that. I mean, we've been struggling with the same thing here at the DigLife Collective too, of course. So for me, I see this as kind of a, if you look at this as a triple Venn diagram, sort of an intersection between conversations happening in channels. So that's these rapidly flowing chat tools, right? Becoming sort of a standard way of holding asynchronous conversations today, right? They're everywhere, right? In organizations, outside organizations, in communities, you know, it's just a given that we have these rapidly flowing chat streams, right? And then on the other side, we have these other tools that help structure that kind of flow. Let me label that as wikis now. You know, it could be websites, it could be let's just call it a wiki, where you begin to sort of organize your content into sections and subsections, into hierarchical trees, and begin to make sense out of this, right? So that's kind of the other side, you know, between the fast-flowing stream here, the informal conversations, unstructured conversations, right, and these highly structured pieces here. And I think both sides have problems, right? So as you mentioned, right, so you go into these rapid streams and you lose information too quickly, right? If you're not there constantly and you don't dive in every day, stuff gets lost and you can't figure out where it is. On the other side, if you have the highly structured environments, that's problematic too, because then you have to have people who really think through the structure, right? If anything changes there, they have to maintain that kind of structure. I mean, there's even a role for that called wiki gardener, right? To actually go in there and do the gardening every day, right? It's a perfect job role description. But it's needed. It's really needed. And these structures over time tend to get more wieldy, right? Or unwieldy. And oftentimes get abandoned, I have to say. I've seen so many wikis in my life, you know, that started out with, oh, all participation, let's do this and this and this. And then after a while just fade away, and then people don't go in there anymore because the overhead, the workload for maintaining that kind of structure is tremendous, right? So our approach at DigLife, let me talk a little bit about what we're thinking currently, is sort of find the middle ground here. Find a way.
Can I just ask that we stop the screen share so that we see each other's faces better?
Oh yes, that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. So at DigLife, we try to find sort of a middle ground here between the highly structured environments like a wiki, like a web page, like a structured repository, and the fast-flowing chat streams. And we do this through simple, we call this note-taking, and something what I call it social objects. So social objects are sort of things that are more stable, you know, where people gather around and they can reappear in these streams, right? So that could be a drawing, that could be a text document, this could be a simple plain note, right? A text note that resurfaces in these rapidly flowing chat streams and are sort of built upon, by certain teams. And to me, that may be one approach to say, okay, we don't want to go too deep into the structured side, and we don't want to, go too far on the surface, too rapidly flowing through this thing and not catching anything anymore. So the notes are just one way to say, okay, let's take these notes and tag them appropriately, right? So they can actually be resurfaced in certain contexts. What you said, Christina, is super important. Of course, you want to have that information surface in the right context. And for me, I want to keep that, as flexible and sort of unstructured as long as possible before these things can resurface, or before they are embedded in a more deeper structure, right, where they become more static objects, right? So if we can keep this as fluid as long as possible, I think that will be helpful in this whole knowledge navigation thing. But it's hard because people tend to, either want to move it into a structure and say, here it is, here's the guideline, the document, it's fixed here in that domain now. Versus others see this more as a fluid document, as a sort of a living document that changes all the time, right? So the whole idea of what is a document, what is something that's written down and a social object where it attracts other people, is really fuzzy, right? And we don't want to really define it that much too, right? So what is that thing that you want to build, that you want to have as an outcome here for everybody to share, to agree, to make sense around and build upon, right? Great thing what you guys are doing is these are highly co-creative, collaborative environments, right? So we're not in this alone anymore, right? That's the good news, right? We figure out, hey, there are others actually in the same space who want to do the same stuff, right, that you guys are doing. So let's share our knowledge, share our work, right, and see what's the best way to disseminate that, right, and bring others onto the same level, right? Because there are always new people coming on board, joining, and they have to, orient themselves, right? And it's a hard thing to do, right? If you're confronted with a huge structure or with a lot of information, where do you start, right? That's always a huge problem. So bringing people into these spaces and slowly guiding them and finding ways to do that, I think is tremendous work. You guys are doing, and we're trying to figure out some ways to do that, right? I believe there's lots of work to do. So this is the beginning what's possible to navigate that stuff in the near future. Okay, I'll stop here. I'll talk too much.
And it's just I just see a great affinity between the two organizings of Collective One and the DigLife Collective, and I knew there'd be some chemistry if we could help each other somehow. Not quite sure what that might look like just yet, but that's half the fun of
create an overlap. Just create an overlap.
Just do it. But the one thing that you reminded me of, Joachim, there was this movement at the moment that I come across that's gathering pace, which is moving away from platform centricity or application centricity towards data centricity. And I think, well, yeah, it's moving in the right direction, but that's not the end game. That can't be the end game. To move beyond data centricity, we have to get to either or both and context centric and conversation centric, because that's who we are. Last I checked, we don't interact with data. We interact with each other, and we interact with data that's been combined and made sense of and has transformed into information and knowledge. So the context centricity and the conversation centricity is paramount, and this move to data centricity is just a stepping stone. But of course, as soon as you bring in the fact that a context by definition is unique and a conversation by definition is subjective and unique, it does do my head in terms of contemplating the interface that might go alongside that. What's the user experience, man? I mean, that sounds like that's got to be unique as well.
So no, yeah, we are not sure, but we want to build something with many different user experiences, not one. We are not building another discourse. We are building something that you can branch Discourse and make it compatible with it and keep the same user experience you have on Discourse.
So you're working at a lower level in the stack. You're a protocol in I guess, the sense of the word, which is lower level than something I would interact with directly. In the same way Matrix works. Matrix isn't, I don't interact with Matrix, I interact with an application that uses or works off of Matrix.
Yeah, Matrix do this thing of creating these objects that doesn't live on any platform. It's a room idea. They live on the imagination of the protocol implementers. But they don't live on any given server, but they exist. We want to do something like that. We created virtual spaces that don't exist on any given platform, but they do exist. And so it's just a simple protocol. I don't want to look here metaphysical. I'm not trying to confuse you on purpose. But a good use of our time, if you agree with me, is that I will go a little bit very fast over the white paper so that you understand. I can share with you a little better what we want this to be the evolution and why we think that even though the current front end of Collective One might be an interesting playground, the underscore protocol is much more than that. So I don't want to just leave you with the current front end, okay? If I might. So see how this takes and this is loading the whole, okay. So this is the white paper of the underscore protocol right now. So we introduced this concept of virtual contexts, and the idea is that there are three principles. We left conversations for the moment aside, right? They were a first-class citizen. For the moment they are not, but we'll have to see that. But the first principles are the content of each virtual context is not unique. So you can have multiple perspectives, and this is exactly the same as branches in Git on the same context. Okay, that's one thing, and it's really related to Git. The second thing that is very different to Git is that contexts are atomic units. So you could think of context at the beginning as a repository, but they very fast stop being a repository because each subfolder in the repository is a repository itself, and each subfolder and subfile is a repository itself. Okay, so each element is its own repository. So maybe you could recreate something like this with submodules in Git, but this is something that we are from the beginning developing for that use case of everything being a repository. Okay, so the idea is that but you can create from atomic elements, you can create complex information structures. And just to give you an example that I think should be easy to understand. If you went over this before this call, but I will try to go fast on it. Think you want to write a document using Git and use it as a collaboration environment, a virtual space. So you would use some sort of file system-based structure to represent the structure of the document, say 2 sections and 3 paragraphs. And then you have this document on the left with these 2 sections, and these are the sequence of commits you made to create the document. So you create some files, some sections, some folders, and when you want to branch it, maybe you want to change something about the first paragraph of section 1, then you create a new branch. That's just a new commit head on the sequence of commits. So now you have 2 heads starting from the empty initial condition. And you work on that, and if you want to merge, you can merge it. The thing is that you are always working on the same repository, and there is one single database of the branches and the versions of the entire repository. So if you want to do this on the underscore protocol, and to be honest, I would like to go now to the Google Drive, sorry about it. Sorry. Okay. Because it was not, if you want to do this with the underscore protocol, here, open source. you have something a bit more complex. So don't be scared, but the document would be made of here 6 components, 6 contexts. The document itself will be a context. The first paragraph will be its first subcontext. The first section will be its second subcontext. And the second section, its third subcontext. And the unique subcontext of section 1 will be this paragraph. So both titles, documents, and paragraphs are contexts. And you want to build a document, you build this structure, you need some metadata, of course, to say this show this like a title, or treat this like a document. But the thing is that for each of these contexts, you create your own sequence of comments. Here you say the content of this context is document 1, this is the title, and another. So you have 2 types of content: the content data and the list of subcontexts. And so you say this is the document 1, and it has 3 subcontexts. And then you say, okay, this subcontext has this data, which is the paragraph text. These other subcontexts will have this content. Section 1 is just the title. And if you want to make a new perspective of the paragraph of one of the verbs, you just create a branch, thinking it of that piece of that context, okay? And so instead of having to branch the entire document, you just branch that piece of content. And why this is important? Because then what you can do is that you have 2 documents, okay? So document 1, it has section 1, it has paragraph 1, but this paragraph 1 has 2 perspectives. And then one of these perspectives is also reused in another document, document 2, that this has a chapter 1 and then this paragraph. And maybe they are different because in this document 2, for some reasons, the user changed the word, but he wants or she wanted to keep the link explicit so that they know that these 2 documents have something in common. What is this? Okay, no, I'm sorry. You achieve this of having 2 documents in which one of the elements exists in 2 places at the same time. If you had used Git, you would have to do some copy paste at some point of this file, and it would be harder to keep this link alive. So this is the big result is this: any piece of content on any context can be reused on any other context without some walled structure that prevents you from doing that. And this is this is all of it in a way. The idea is that people can start creating this content flexibly. So your personal notepad, maybe I can go to, there are some consideration of what is branching in this, what would be a branching. So it's a bit more complex, but it seems to hold how it would work. There is how do you merge things, and it's also a bit tricky, but we think we have a design that will hold. We are working on this. I won't go into the details of this, but I think to give a better understanding of what we want to do with this is, so another important thing is that you can create a new perspective. We want this to be multi-platform in the sense that you want to create a variation of a paragraph, maybe a piece of content, on a platform, and you can reference a commit, so a version of that paragraph that lives on another platform. And we want to use some IPLD or something like references so that you don't have to pull. Also a problem of Git is that you have to you break the whole database with you most of the time. Here instead, you can easily link to content on other platforms. And okay, if that platform is not available anymore, well, you won't be able to see the content, of course. Maybe you want to pull a local version of this commit. But you can do that if you really want to be sure you will have it. The other thing that I want to show is these views, which shows some examples of platforms and how they apply to contexts and the underscore protocol. So for instance, in Google Drive, you have one context which is you, which is your drive, and then you have subfolders. Those are subcontexts, and you have documents, and you can have some document or folder that is in multiple places at the same time. So Google Drive is one of the structures that is already very relatively closely connected to the underscore protocol. The thing is that they don't have perspective. So they do have version control, but you cannot have two versions alive at the same time. I don't know if they are working on that. But the thing is that if one document is in two places, and if you change it in one place, it will change in the other. You cannot create a mutation, an independent mutation of it. So Trello, for instance, you have an organization, you have which is a context, just a context. You have a board, which is made of columns and labels, and then you have cards that, well, one card cannot be in two columns at the same time, but one card can be in two labels at the same time. So you have these rules for limiting the flexibility. And like a forum also, like a discourse forum, you have categories, posts, and tags. And the thing is that because if all of these platforms were creating context, you could take any context, whatever. You could take an entire forum and put it as a card in a Trello board or something, I don't know, more weird than that. But the thing is that because they have this structure, that hopefully this data structure can be adapted to multiple user experience. I know, Guillaume, you want to share some insights.
No, just to sum up, we are creating like a base layer, the underscore protocol concretely, not collective one. The underscore protocol as a base layer, a generic base layer, on top of which many different data structures and user experience can be built with. But those user experiences will work with one another because all the Trello board will be a context, the same as a Google Drive document, for example. So their children can be interchangeable, they can be linked. So there's we think we are lowering the cost of sharing information that way.
Just to finish the introduction, why this will hold together, because I think one of the key aspects is this section, identity and unique identifier. So the thing is that you don't have to go to a central place to create new context. So Collective One will not run a server, or the underscore protocol won't have a central server that creates the IDs of this new context. You have a protocol that starts from the user ID. We hope we can implement the IDs. That's the current idea is to do that no matter what. And then you start from that, and then you start creating elements like the context. You just create it out of a hash of the user ID, so you can create it on any platform. And you can create perspectives that you can create it on any platform just with, and you'll have the same process to create IDs, so that an ID that is created on one platform can be moved into another platform. It's not a problem. Then you have commits. That's commits is where things becomes like they start to have like these hard links, this content addressable ID. So a commit is now connected to the data. So you have the author, but you also have the content, and then you have the well, this is not a pretty. You have the content, which is the content bytes, and the concatenation of the subcontext. And finally, yeah, this is why I was working on Collective One, because this version is not updated. I'm not working here. So identity and identifiers. So the commit will have a commit content. The content will have the data, and the data can live on IPFS or anything. And you can create these elements on any platform, and so you are not forced to have one central place to orchestrate everything. It's in a way this is kind of the heart in a way of the protocol, because if people just create content this way on their platforms, they are inviting anyone to just say, okay, take the content you have on my platform and share it in this other platform without losing the link, or even edit there and bring me your changes when you're ready. that's it. Right? We're running out of time. I wanted to go over the white paper, to go a little bit into the details of what's next, which I think is much more than just the web app of Collective.
So well, before we go,
Christina, you.
Before we go, do you have a little bit of time to run over, or do you have a hard stop at the end of the hour?
No, we are okay. We have
Me too.
time.
Okay. Anybody else who needs to leave, feel free. This has been absolutely fascinating. And I'm wondering if we could talk Joachim into doing a little screen share. Just so you see, it's almost like I see the underscore protocol as sort of down here, and the portal that we've built kind of up here as potential user interface. So I would love to find next steps and like ways to play together and create a shared space so we can start doing that. We have
that sounds cool.
We have within the Digital Life Collective, we had a whole bunch of different spaces in Mattermost initially, and realized that people were having a hard time finding their context. And so we really grounded it on what you want to do there. So we have one main tile that is just for interest channels around the tech we trust, which is the main conversation, or tech we might trust. And then ops for people working on the collective as a brand and an entity, including board of directors type of stuff, member relations, public engagement, that sort of thing. And then project spaces for all member projects to let people know what they're doing and point them in the direction to their places. And then a partner space for explicit legal entities, other orgs who want to use the platform for their work. And then this new project of one of our members is called the Open Learning Commons, and it's a public space. And the experimentation that you've just shown seems really in line with this sort of meta experiment on how people learn together. So I would love you to talk to Robert at some point. And I'm excited. I can't wait to see what comes of this.
Yeah, nice, great. We're excited too, it seems, from
So sure. So anybody who needs to drop off, please go ahead, right? And I can share a couple of things that we're doing here at the DigLife Collective, Peppo, so you can see where we're heading with this. Before I go there, looking at your demo and the vision and direction you're taking it now with what you described in the white paper, reminds me a lot on the work of Ted Nelson. Ted Nelson, the internet pioneer, who did a thing called Project Xanadu or something, where he brought like a dimensionality into documents, so you can actually zoom in and out of documents and go into other dimensions, directions that the document is going into. Hard to describe that, and he has a demo where you can see that actually in 3D, where he zooms in and out of certain paragraphs and sections within a document, right? And you can put it in, put it out, and find out more and preserve all the linkages between these sections, right? And so you can always come back and continue to work on your main thread there. So it reminded me a lot on his work. And of course, Doug Engelbart too, with his dynamic knowledge repository, trying to have a common shared knowledge space where everybody can contribute to, right? And build this thing together, co-create and collaborate in that space. So that's a fascinating aspect. To me, going back to what Philip said earlier, I find conversations highly visceral, oftentimes, many times, meaning they can branch into any kind of direction very quickly. They can become very emotional, very loaded, very much taken by certain people into certain directions, right? So to me, what I'm trying to think now through is actually to build, rather than diving into the structure of the conversation and dissect that, rather build a scaffolding around the conversation, right? So keep the conversation as it is. So take our conversation here in the Zoom chat, right? But then run some diagnostics sort of on top of the conversation and see who has talked, who hasn't talked, what have we talked about, run some text extraction methods to actually capture or grab some of the topics out of our conversation here, bundle it up and put it into a document, where you have your text file of the same video conversation, and then maybe sort that and organize that in some text file to say, hey, if you want to see that video call, you could even have links in that file to point back to the moment when somebody said that, brought out that topic, or this tension arose in the conversation. Things like that to me are scaffolding around conversations, rather than diving into the conversation itself and begin to structure that in certain ways to dive deeper into that. So there's a certain tension here, and I'm not want to be critical about any of these, right? It's just such an explorative space that I think we're currently all discovering, and see how we navigate in these increasingly large informational spaces, right? Okay, I can share some of the things we're working on here. This is a screen of we call the DigLife portal, kind of an entry point into all kinds of services that we have. And you see on top here, these are the typical domains that could be, one way to see that is Slack domains, Slack tools, but we're using another tool called Mattermost, where we have these Mattermost teams or domains. So let me show you one high-level view into this, where we created what I call a holonic chart, where you can see the entire architecture of the space in these holons, right? So holons are just, representation of a tree structure where we organize the different channels. So you can move around and you can see the different channels that we have. Here's a bunch of important channels. Then move over here. So here are some of these typical interest channels we have because we're Tech We Trust, so we talk about technology topics. And you can then go deeper into the structure and say, okay, so AI, what is happening in AI? So I can click on this, and it brings me now onto the conversation level, right? So here's AI right in the Mattermost tool, right? And you see the same domains here on the left side that kind of separate the different areas we're working in. And then, of course, here you have the conversation happening, right? So this rapid flow of stuff that's highly unstructured, highly uncoordinated and visceral, and you name it, right? It's in here. And to me, what I would like to bring into this is sort of a way of, okay, there's certain nuggets here, and that could tie into the tools you're building too, right? So certain nuggets that now tie to this conversation, right? So you can zoom out of the conversation and say, okay, let me see what a different view of that, and that could be, here, let me show you the card view. Very similar to what you have with cards, right? So show me the channels and cards, and tell me a little bit about what the channel is about. Tell me who's actually currently working inside the channel, right? And easy ways to join that, right? So understand what this is about, joining that and contributing to that. So that's on the channel level. But then you can go deeper, of course. I mentioned these nodes, right, as a way to sort of find the place between highly structured environments and these fast-flowing chat streams, right? So these are what I call these sort of social objects or nodes that we're taking to preserve that knowledge that's generated in these conversations, and begin to work on these more stable pieces, right? So if I open one of these nodes, you've probably seen that. That's standards like CodiMD or based on HackMD stuff, where you have a simple editor, right? You can go into edit mode here, and then you can do some markdown editing. And you see that in real time, of course, on the right side here. So that to me is an effective way of saying, okay, let's work on some more stable document. We can break it down into paragraphs here, and we can versioning the whole thing, which I love, of course. So you can always go back to something that was there if you went down a wrong path, right? And you can also label this whole thing. So what we typically do at the bottom is a bunch of tags about this document, so you can resurface it in different contexts, right? You can put this website development into a publishing content group or in a marketing group, and they can continue working on that, right? And you can say who worked on this, so that you can also create these network graphs where you can actually see people, how are they engaged inside the collective, right? So in this case here, we're trying to tie these different skill sets together that we bring into the collective and to see where they're being used and how they're connecting to other members. So the identity, of course, is a very important piece of that. You want to preserve that and see how can we use that information to sort of weave this more or engage the community more into other activities that are happening across the collective, right? So I'll stop here. I don't want to get too deep into this, but so the thinking is, to me, these cards are great sort of standalone elements that we can now use to resurface that in different conversational contexts. But I can see these cards now popping up, let's say, on boards. I'm a longtime friend of John Keldon in the conversation community, and he loves to put ththese things on different 2x2s, 3x3s boards that sort of explore the content in different angles, right? And navigate it that way, right? So having a conversation around these cards on a board, I think is a meaningful thing, again, to move the conversation forward, right? Another scaffolding thing around the conversation, and to enrich the conversation with notes, with visuals, with drawings that support this whole thing. So it's very much exploring here, and we're still, as I said, this is version 0.1.
Can you talk about the initial implementation of /dig and social objects, and sort of like how you can tie those objects to a specific context using just one thing that seems really that we share a lot between the DigLife Collective and the work that Pepe, that you've just shown us. I don't know how much is underscore protocol and how much is collective one. Is this idea of a socio-technical stack, that the social protocols are part of what makes the software work. And if you don't, it's like a bug in the code. And so, I don't know. I miss /dig, and I would like them to know sort of a little bit about that. I don't know if you have anything you can show, but you could just tell them. Yeah.
Real quick. So /dig, that was a command we introduced inside the chat space. So you type in a special command called dig, and then /dig, and then you can say something like, I'm not sure if there's any members here. There are no members here. Let me see if we've used it in Social Ledger. I don't even think we've brought it over into the new chat space. Yeah, it doesn't exist here. So that gives you an idea of issuing quick commands here.
There you go.
The listing of links here of certain norms we established for that channel, right? And then /members, that other command would tell you who are the members and what kind of role they have. So it's a very command line interface, using it something like DigLife team, and then you can say who's part of this channel, just as a shortcut to quickly add people to a channel and then tie them into a domain. What I find is it requires some extra training, an extra step for people to actually understand that there is a / command in the Mattermost tool, right? And then you run into barriers with, I don't want to learn some extra command, right? So what I want to try is, take some of this, what we've done with the /dig command, and bring that back into a user interface that's like point and click, right? Where everything is obvious. It's on the UI, right? You just click on something that looks like a go here. It looks like a calendar icon, and then you open a calendar, right? For example. And let me refresh this a little quick. Here, calendar icon, and then you get into a calendar, and then you click another thing, then you see what's going on here, and you can add something new to the calendar, right? So this kind of point and click is something I wanted to push that into this visual graphical user interface to help people move around. The other thing is this is it's a bigger piece of a smaller piece of a larger puzzle around what are the different elements that we actually need to build these I call it the 21st century cooperation as a service element. So cooperation is not only about the conversation itself, the chats that we begin to program, the real-time calls and the cognition tools we can embed in the calls, and the maps and the skill settings and potential that we capture in here. There's a lot more on the map, and we're starting to sort of fill out the gaps now, better understand, social psychological elements like protocols and principles, the decision flows inside the organization, right? But then also on the bottom layer here, Philip mentioned earlier what I call the rhizomatic elements. So where does the data reside? When we call something warm data, what does that mean, right? Is that data that feeds back into the collective? Can people benefit from that? Can they build on top of that? Can they modify it? Can they use it, right? And then also, how does it all feed into sort of local communities and local systems where you apply the data and bring it into actual context of project work, permaculture work, for all kinds of work. So this is an evolving map for me, for the collective, right? For understanding of what the different pieces are to create these environments, just like what you wanted to do, right? Is create environments that are more conducive to learning, very open, very transparent, very inviting to everyone, to say, yes, if I have a role, if I have a skill set, what can I do for you guys, right? So help me make that connection, make that easy and say, I have a starting point, I want to get engaged here, and here's what you can do, right? So all of this stuff, I think we're all working on this, and to be continued, right? Okay.
The relevance for me comes from the fact that cooperation as a service exists to allow cooperatives or similar organizations with shared values to come together and use a integrated suite of software that helps them work better effectively, but also work with rather than just work within. And therefore the context couldn't be more, to me, that's the ultimate difference in context. If you've got two people in the same organization, they have a slightly different context, different lens, depending on their function, their job title, the purpose of the organization, the strategy they're pursuing. But get two people looking to cooperate in entirely different organizational contexts, and bang, I mean, here we are. We've just spent 76 minutes together, and we're still trying to find common context to see how we might work together. My God, it's so inefficient. It's ridiculous. So through this cooperation as a service, this suite, as we onboard various communities, how do we not just accommodate that cross-fertilization, but encourage it, nudge it, engineer serendipity? And we can only do that if we can have some ability for the context to stick. We don't have that at the moment. We're hoping to bring the International Bateson Institute on as a collective, who can then advise us on what the hell they mean by warm data. And I say that as a certified warm data lab host, and I'm still saying, okay, I got the certificate, but I haven't run a warm data lab yet. I will do. But there's something in the concepts of warm data. There's something in the context you described at Collective One. There's something in cooperation as a service that needs to meld. In fact, then also with my other hat on over at Akasha Foundation, we've been working on something called hyperdata, which, if cooperation as a service might sit on top of _protocol, _protocol might sit on top of hyperdata, because it's trying to solve that cross-platform, cross-protocol interlinking, such that anything on IPFS can link with Web 2, can link with something on your local directory. So it is that there is something very potent here, and I'm just wondering what the best way is to collaborate. Part of answering the question about how we might collaborate might come down to your expectations for Collective One's commercialization in the world. We haven't really touched on, or at least if you did, it was before I was able to join the call at past. How you envisage letting _protocol out into the world. Is it open source? Is it partly commercial? Is it proprietary? I don't really know at this stage. Yeah. I'd love to understand that better.
So I can share my perspective. It can be discussed. So the _protocol is protocol. It's just a set of rules. It's not even code, and it's of course open source. we want, I mean, it's not proprietary. It's like a matrix.org spec. And that is, of course, open source. Then on top of that, we want to make a couple of two implementations. One is going to be a Web 2.0 web server, which is going to be a collective one. The other is going to be, hopefully, a holochain. A holochain, I mean, we have hope that holochain will be live soon. So a holochain DNA, a holochain application. If that doesn't go well, we could do a Ethereum application. It's not, seems not to be so, once you have the rules, not so hard. I mean, that would be, of course, open source. And the Web 2.0 application, we are following up an approach based on web components, so that most of the elements that we develop can be reused in other applications, like easily. And I think most of them are going to be open source. So the idea is to grow the community. Yet we have to find a business model for us, because we are bootstrapping. I've been bootstrapping for 2 years. So I'm really, but not only a personal thing, but of course it goes out like this and it becomes like clear. Maybe there's a personal thing, but it's also a principle thing. I think that projects need to have a robust, resilient business model on them, and I think that's very good for projects. So one of the things that I would like to have for Collective One is that it's an open project. So they maybe think of a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So maybe it will hold intellectual property on some of the software it creates. Maybe I would think customized version of Collective One for a company would not be open source licensed. Maybe some very advanced professional front-end would require a license. But this would be owned by an open collective of developers that work, it's always open for new developers. And the only thing is that we have a value system, a formal governance process to govern this intellectual property. So it's mostly open source. We really want this to be tried on different implementations. If this protocol holds, it will be really great. So we will want to keep people aware of that. But we want there to be a business model for sustainability. And this business model hopefully will run on a DEO, maybe in an Aragon or a DAO stack DEO. I might be aware of the what you do on Ethereum.
Wow. So I guess the best summary of that is you have the same challenges as almost every other open source project out there. It's a pain. The value can't be. It's ridiculous. Someone's got to solve this open source.
I think we started something for that
sustainability freaking problem. It's a recurrent theme.
I would love you both to join the collective, just so I can start putting some spaces together and then see how the spaces that you create intermesh with those. It's $10 a year to be a member of the co-op, and we're really there to support projects like this. So, and there's not any like. It would be great to have you in the chat because we're there, but we can also use chat channels to point to other contexts. So I invite you to do that. And I do think that there's an ongoing conversation in the collective around data trusts and governance of the commons in a way that is not fully open. I think that the open source software world, funding is broken for the actual projects, but there's also a difference between open source software and actually open data. And for example, there's a group of farmers, mostly Black in Atlanta, who are sick and tired of the mostly white nonprofits saying that they're going to do something with the farms there, getting funding from a foundation, and then never giving anything back to the community because they have access to this open data. So that question around data trusts or spaces that are common, but they're not, like, you have to have some sort of buy-in or contributory factor or whatever. So, and I see Michael popping up, so I think we're going to hear about value flows and open money. No. Well, it's an ongoing conversation for sure in the collective.
I can rob 2 minutes to share one idea that we have for funding, and we want to implement it. Is to have a formal process of migration of the project from the developers and promoters ownership to a public infrastructure. So it's something we want to implement. Also, I didn't mention it because it's another degree of complication, but of freedom. But basically, what we want to do with EM is that on Collective One, each one of us can invest, and if we work in Collective One, is because we are investors. We are just investing time instead of money to pay developers. We are the developers. But there is another developer which is being paid. He's not investing because he is being paid. So the difference between investment is, of course, the risk associated to that. And we are putting up this, or thinking, well, it's not yet done. We're thinking of putting up this formal investment process on Collective One, on the DAO of Collective One DAO maybe, in which when you invest on it, you put a value on it, which will be basically your market price, your opportunity cost based on your profile, and you can associate a risk factor to it. So I can say I want to work on developing the underscore protocol. I could get a job for, we are in Spain, maybe 50,000 euros a year, but I will work on this. So my nominal value is 50,000, but of course I'm not getting the money, so there is a risk associated to that. So I put a risk bonus on it. Every time I work on Collective One, I am investing with a risk bonus. And then Collective One, and I am free to decide that. I can say it is 10 times, okay? Because I think maybe I will work on this for 10 years, I don't know, without payment or whatever. So I decide the risk factor. It doesn't end here. Then other investors can come and say, I want to invest in Collective One, and I want to pay the developer, okay, in money. And I want to pay you, Pepo, as the developer. So instead of asking you 10 times the risk factor, I can invest your salary, and I will accept 8 times the risk factor. So it's more competitive, his investment. And in that case, I would be obliged. I mean, the project would be obliged to kick me out of the picture, take the money from the investor, and hire another developer. This looks bad for the developer, but if you see it the other way, maybe the developer we have hired is from Argentina. When we pay him, we pay him around $2,000 a month. He will know that this cash is arriving from an investor that is hoping to get 10 times or maybe 20 times that amount when the project generates revenue. And maybe he says, okay, you know what? I want to compete with the investor. Just pay me half, and I will get the other half at 15x risk factor. So I absorb part of the risk. And then what we want to do is to keep track of all these investments, and instead of converting them into equity, we convert them into bonds or debt that are paid back when the project generates revenue. And once everybody's paid back, they are out of the picture. So you are not owner of the project. You have already received what you were wanting to risk. Thank you for your services, and that's it.
Thank you for your capital.
Now we want to implement it. There is an Ethereum contract for this. It's just a playground of it cannot be deployed, but we could implement this on an Ethereum contract. We are both Ethereum developers.
So Philip has to go.
So I was about to say I do have to shoot, unfortunately. So I'm going to love you and leave you. But I do know, Peppo, that in terms of value accounting, which I think is the general term of what you were describing, is not just a core competence of Michael Linton, but I think kind of Michael might have partly invented it. I don't know. So I just attribute all of these things to you, Michael, because you're so conversant in them. So I hope that's a fruitful conversation, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next few days and weeks as we mash this together. Sorry I arrived late and now I have to leave before everyone else, but lovely to catch up. See you soon. Thanks, Christine. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
So I would love to talk another hour, but I can't. I have to go too. But
I wanted to share that idea with you, but it was a bit extensive. But just to know that we are also on the page.
On the from the sustainability world, you may want to look at the Cutting Edge Capital link that I gave in the chat. This is a firm in Oakland, California, that's looking at direct public offerings, and some of what they talk about, although it's not powered by the blockchain, seems really similar to what you talk about, especially, kind of getting away from you have to be a creditor investor, and the people with money are the ones who get all the rewards. It helps break the success to the successful loop. And other than that, I would love to help, make the signals and such in the DigLife spaces so that people can find your project and see what makes sense as you appear in our space, and we can make signals over to the spaces where you would like to invite the public, or DigLife members, or whatever, or developers only, or whatever the boundary is.
Great. So on my side, I would say that seeing the way the tool you have implemented, you are being really good at connecting existing tools like Mattermost, and well, I don't know if there are other open source projects on that, but so I see you have connected different open source projects, and I don't know to what extent you want to continue with that. Of course, I imagine you want. I don't know if the Holon plot is something that you created from scratch or not. The thing to be considered, I think, is if you want to run like a test sub project of thinking, just thinking how the processes that you are enabling on your platform could be like mapped in the underscore protocol, and if the underscore protocol would be able to absorb all the flux, the information flux that are happening. I would like to do that. I mean, we can keep on the conversation in Mattermost, but to be even more concise, if you want to have another call to discuss maybe about this, it would be interesting for me and for us. I don't know.
For sure.
Sometimes the discussions on the chats are not. It's not easy to have a follow-on. So maybe you can specify it in this call that we are face to face.
We could also asynchronously put a little bit of this video, but also the information, the key links that you would like people to read, and put in the announcements channel that the call is happening, and pick a date a couple weeks hence, so we can get some of the people that we know are going to be interested in this in the room.
Okay. Okay, let's use that channel.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna check out too. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And see you on the other side, right? And then we can chat more.
Okay.
I'm going to just put our join link so you have easy access to, because our current website is a mess. So I'll put that in the chat. We are currently redesigning the whole thing. Anyway.
Sound good.
Okay, Christine.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.